So we do thank each and every one of you for coming today. We know we have representatives from law enforcement, from education, as well as parents in the room. And I just want to say that across the state, we've seen that everyone shares the same goal, and that is to have safe schools and to keep our students safe and in a productive learning environment. Again, this session is about listening to you and the information that you want to share with us. So let's begin with Amy. Who would be the first person?
All right, Jerry Lee.
Good afternoon, members of the task force. My name is Jerry Lee. I am the Associate Executive Director for the Missouri School Board Association's Center for Education Safety. I'm also serving in my 13th year as school board in Springfield Public Schools. And do I need to talk into one of these? Would be better. Do one of them go? Good? Okay. So welcome to Springfield and welcome to Glendale. Glad you're here. And I'm pleased to provide some background information on the Center for Education Safety. I provided Mr. Fennerwall a copy of a much more in-depth white paper that covers the background and the history of CES, and I'm certainly not going to cover all that. I'd be here all afternoon, and some of the resources. But I did want to give you a little background on the Center for Education Safety. Center for Education Safety, better known as CES, you'll hear me say that instead of Center for Education Safety, was launched in 2010, and it's the Missouri's officially recognized school safety center. It's supported and operated as part of the Missouri School Board Association, in collaboration with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and Department of Public Safety. It's nationally recognized by both the U.S. Department of Education and also the Department of Justice. It was originally funded jointly through a Homeland Security grant and received administrative support from the Missouri School Board Association. When the grant money ceased, MSBA continued to solely host and fund the center, with the exception of some limited resources from the Missouri Legislature in 2015 and 16 and 18 and 19 fiscal years. CES also participates on a national level with the National School Safety Alliance, which is a grassroots-driven and collaborative effort of the 50 states to share information on best practices and on school safety. Paul Fennerwall serves as the administrator of that alliance. We meet monthly, and it's also worth noting, I think, that not only the National School Safety Alliance, but CES played a sizable role or a significant role in providing testimony to the White House Commission and input to the White House Commission's report on school safety, the federal report. So we do have a national presence somewhat from a CES standpoint. Knowing that that school safety is not just a school issue, there are many organizations and agencies that touch school safety. We know that. We receive a lot of assistance and valuable mission guidance from an advisory council that we have, consisting of nearly 40 different agencies and organizations. And I provided Paul a list of all 40 of those that provide guidance for the Center for Education Safety. And as you'll find out, it's a broad range of agencies. CES facilitates numerous consultations, discussions, and provides training resources to not just school superintendents, board members, school staff members, and parents on a variety of school safety related issues. And we do that at all levels: local, state, national, and even some international. We've done training on an international basis. But the primary goal of CES is to increase connectivity, collaboration, and communication between emergency planners, law enforcement, schools, and communities to make schools safer. And in summary, CES is truly dedicated to enhancing all aspects of emergency planning, preparedness, safety, and security in schools throughout Missouri: pre-K, K-12, post-secondary, public and private, providing those resources. And so our primary focus is assisting schools, providing resources to create safe and secure learning environments so that every student can achieve their full potential through a quality education, and we meet our duty to protect those kids. One final note I just want to make is on July 8th through the 10th this summer, the Center for Education Safety is holding its annual Safe Schools and Colleges Conference here in Springfield. It'll cover a wide variety of school safety topics. I would truly like to invite the task force to the conference if you can work it into your schedule. I think there'll be an opportunity for you to have a discussion with our two keynote speakers. One of them is Tom Wheeler, who was the administrator for the White House Commission in creating the federal report on school safety, and also Susan Payne, who was the creator of Safe to Tell, the hotline app in Colorado following the Columbine tragedy. Both of those are our keynote speakers, and we can certainly provide an opportunity for you all to attend that at no cost, to come to Springfield, come back to Springfield and attend that conference, and we can hopefully work something out. You can have a communication or a dialogue with those two people to do that. So really, I thank you for the opportunity for being here, and I appreciate your commitment to providing a safe environment for the 1.3 million students in Missouri. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the task force? Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate the overview of CES.
Happy to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bradley Cooper.
Am I good to start whenever? Yes, you are. Awesome. Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank all of you guys for everything you do traveling the state, and I'll look forward to going to several of the different locations with you all over the next couple of weeks as we continue to make sure that Missouri schools are the safest that they can possibly be in the state. For those who don't know, on December 21st, 2018, my high school's hard lockdown alarm went off at 7:09 in the morning. And when that went off, it was a bit different than alarms going off in the past. Schools typically have an overarching plan, and then they do simulations or preparations during class time. But what a lot of schools at least don't publicly think about, or internally think about even, are attacks that come during lunchtime, in between classes, and in the morning. From what I've heard from staff, the majority of the student body was present at Willard High School on that morning. They were confined in an area much like this called the Commons. Our active shooter program shuts all of our doors and locks them going into the main education hallways. And that is fantastic during the classroom. But if students are eating lunch and then they're trapped inside of that area, or if they're in the morning and trapped inside of that area until those doors become unlocked, staff members have described them as just clay pigeons until the school is able to set them free. Buses were still unloading that morning, and teachers, from what they have told me, were shielding students with their own bodies and telling them to be quiet because there's an active shooter possibly in the building. The issue is, this was not something that is prepared for widely amongst schools in Missouri. Missouri has some of the safest schools in the country, and I completely applaud that. But in the end, it comes down to being prepared for multiple scenarios at multiple times. And not every school is the same. Not every school probably will be the same. That is why we need to have an overarching plan, but then, in the opinion of the staff members that I have talked to, have state officials or DESE affiliates come down and independently audit each school. Each school has a different framework, a different location style, and different students and staff, all of which require different help in order to become even better. Now, after the false alarm that happened at Willard High School, I emailed my administration and asked the school officials to create an anonymous survey for students to share their opinion to the school and give them advice on how they think they can improve. The school declined to do such survey. I asked to have a meeting, and I did have a meeting with the school. And I had a meeting with district officials, and in that meeting, I was told, quote, "When you look at the statistics referencing an active shooting, it is unlikely to happen. You seem pretty educated on these things, Bradley, so you probably know the statistics on these things. We have over 3,000 kids a year driving a vehicle. That is 8 to 9 students per day that are killed, but yet nobody is taking away cell phones. Just statistically wise, an active shooting, is an unlikely event." As a student who is standing up for proper school preparation, the last thing you want to be told by your district officials is that it's an unlikely event and we should focus on taking away student cell phones instead of actually preparing for a, quote, unlikely event. Staff members have said that this has gone against every single bit of the training they have received. This was as close as to a real-world simulation you could get. School officials were not aware of this attack, of this false alarm before it happened. And that goes to show you what would happen in a real situation. And it's both disheartening and concerning, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you in the future and our state legislature to make sure that this is fixed not just for Willard, but for every school in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie German.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie Gurman. I serve a lot of roles, so I'm not sure which one you want to hear about first, but I'm a retired educator, administrator, have currently been working at the university with the Regional Professional Development Center, and I serve on the school board at Willard, and also am currently a member of the executive directors of Missouri School Board Association. So I appreciate Bradley's comments, and I'm not here to speak to his concerns because everyone's got their own individual points of view. My concern in a practitioner role is that we know that the majority, if not all, of the active school shooting events that have occurred have been at the hands of students who were identified with mental health issues somewhere prior to their actions in the schools. And I currently, in my role at the RPDC, do a lot of work with trauma-informed schools, trauma-sensitive schools, trauma-responsive schools, education. And it's clear to me, I've probably worked with close to 300 to 400 staff members of various schools across Southwest Missouri this year. And it's clear to me that they are begging, pleading for more support and more help with mental health issues, starting from kindergarten all the way through high school. And so it's my belief that if we are going to make an impact in school safety, we have a lot of kids coming to school at a very young age that have already experienced more trauma than many of us adults will ever hope to see in our lifetime. And the research is clear that it does do significant damage to the brain over long periods of time, complex traumatic events, repetitive events. And our school counselors, our classroom teachers, first of all, are not equipped to handle the depth and the level of those mental illnesses, and many times the families don't have the means and the support financially or otherwise to be able to get the help that their children need. So I would hope that this commission will consider some inclusion of those types of concerns in the work going forward. And in terms of talking about trauma with children, there's more and more conversation being had even now with children who are coming home from school scared because of the drills that take place in their schools. They're scared because of seeing armed officers in their buildings, especially younger children. There are numerous events that have occurred over the last 10 or 15 years of people who have left guns unattended and by accident, and children have gotten a hold of those, and it creates a traumatic experience for lots of people when those things happen. So I did not make a prepared remark. I just kind of did this off the cuff, so I apologize, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Just a comment first. Sometimes off those cuff remarks are some of the best that we get, so I appreciate you being willing to come up here. Again, as a practitioner, you probably have at least some background knowledge of some really emerging best practices that we ought to consider offering and implementing maybe statewide in our schools. Some of them probably not a lot of cost, maybe some of them might cost. If you take my card and you'd maybe send me an email, because one of the things we want to do, not only identify where the gaps and the challenges are, but then find some solutions and have some resources that we can offer to people through this report to the governor. So if you take a card and share that with us,
Absolutely,
we'd
I'd be happy
appreciate it.
to. Thank you.
I'd like to talk with you afterwards, too, if you have a minute.
I'd be happy to visit with
Great,
you.
great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tracy Stepp. I have a teacher voice, so I'm
You should be fine.
Hi, my name is Tracy Stepp. I'm a retired teacher and a member of Moms Demand Action and a gun owner. I taught at Ozark R6 for 32 years, and so school safety is very important to me. Recently, there's been a push throughout the nation to arm teachers in an effort to make our schools safer. I don't feel this is the answer to safer schools for many reasons, so I asked several of my teacher friends how they feel about arming, and here are their direct responses. 8 quotes. First one, I didn't go into teaching to become Rambo. My concerns are about liability. For instance, what if I'm armed and I freeze up during a school shooting? Can I be sued for neglect? Am I supposed to leave my students alone while I go look for a shooter? I have coworkers that I would not trust to carry a gun safely and respectfully. I would imagine their students would feel the same way, which could create a lot of student anxiety. I have students who are much bigger than me. I would be afraid one of them could take the gun away from me. I would not want my own child in a classroom with a gun. How would I know it's being stored safely? How would the parents be assured that the teacher had adequate training to use that weapon? I've heard horror stories in the news lately about guns accidentally going off in classrooms or teachers leaving guns in restrooms. I've spent many, many hours training to be the best teacher I can be. Where would teachers find the additional time for weapons training? Where would the money come from for this training? Schools without resource officers should train and arm their administrators, not their teachers. Last one. There's a great emphasis these days for teachers to build relationships with students and know what's going on in their lives. I'm all for that. But it doesn't make sense to me for politicians, administrators, or whoever to say to me, build relationships with troubled students, but here's a gun in case you need to shoot one of them. Back to me. So I'm asking this question now. When I was a teacher, students often came to me with what they considered to be an unsolvable problem. My response to them was always, what could you do that would make sense? Many times this would prompt them to come up with a sensible solution on their own. So I'm asking you, School Safety Task Force, what could you do that would make sense? Step 1, in my opinion, establish threat assessment teams in each Missouri school district. This team could include teachers, counselors, school psychologists if available, administrators, and resource officers if available. This team would provide identification of violent behaviors, early intervention, home visits, and counseling for a student who shows signs of potential violent behavior to themselves or others. A 2002 FBI report written by their Behavioral Analysis Unit states, by far the most valuable prevention strategy identified was the Threat Assessment and Management Team. A 2018 Homeland Security study stated that preventing violence by detecting and addressing these behavioral red flags is more effective than any physical security measure. Step 2, establish statewide guidelines and training for what constitutes a threat. Consider establishing a threat tip line, ways to monitor social media for threats, and developing a program that will train students on reporting threats. Train schools to partner with technology companies in order to monitor students' postings on social media sites, as many students post their emotions and frustrations on social media. The Safe Schools Initiative report states that 81% of school shooting perpetrators left behind evidence that they were victims of severe bullying. Develop statewide mental health screenings to help counselors and educators identify students who are demonstrating signs of mental illness. According to the National Alliance of Mental Illness in 2010, 21% of U.S. children ages 9 through 17 have a diagnosable mental health disorder. Step 3, provide more funding for school safety. Currently, Missouri spends only 25 cents per student on school safety. Increasing this funding could provide schools with more counselors, psychologists, and resource officers. Schools especially need more counselors who conduct psychosocial counseling groups on topics including bullying, grief and loss, conflict resolution, coping skills, and anger management. A 2013 study on school shootings by J.H. Lee found that 81% of shooting perpetrators had a grievance at the time of their attack. We can do much more to identify and help students who may exhibit signs of violence, which is key to preventing school shootings. Let's be proactive, not reactive. That's what would make sense. I'd like to thank you for the work you're doing and for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to present. Do you have any questions for me?
You'll leave that statement with us?
I left a copy over there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me today. I appreciate being here. My name is Craig Reeves. I'm an assistant principal at Lebanon High School. I'm also a Safe Schools coordinator for the District of Lebanon. More importantly, I have two children who go to Drury College, and one child, my little baby, is a junior at Lebanon High School. It's important what we're doing. Everybody behind me is here for a reason. So thank you. I want to say thank you for letting us come and talk to you guys. The first thing I want to talk to you about is a standard of training for schools. It is really tough for schools to talk about active shooters. On one side of our mouth, we're saying your kids are safe. The other side, we're saying we need to train. My belief is that some schools want to ignore it. I think they want to ignore it. They don't want to have to tell their clientele that there is a problem. And no matter what we want to say, schools are a soft target. We have to make them a hard target. And so what I'm asking for, if you look on the second page of that handout, is these, I believe, are the current guidelines for school safety training. My belief is that it's very loose, and I understand we want to keep as much control with the local schools as we can, but I think we're at a tipping point right now that the state needs to give us some more guidance, needs to give the schools that reason, say, yeah, we understand, but hey, we're following state guidelines. And that's important. That helps when they're talking to that mad parent. The handout that I give you is a may versus shall, and I'll let you look at that. There are very few shalls in that the schools will do it. There's a lot of mays. And then once again, I understand local control, but I think we're at a point now where we have to understand that we need that support. So I would encourage you to do that. The reality is we want to train, we want to be the best we can, we want to protect our kids no matter what. Second part is best practices. I think there's tons of best practices out there already. The run, hide, fight is a wonderful thing. The young man from Willard here mentioned a perfect scenario. You cannot just plan for one type of event. Can't plan for that, hey, I'll be able to drop a secondary locking device, and I brought a few up here that are readily available to the public. And these devices are meant for when we're in a static situation. That young man was not in a static situation. Therefore, you don't just plan for one type of situation. You plan for what if, and that's what we do at Lebanon. We don't, sometimes we announce where the shooter's at, sometimes we don't say who it is, we just say lock your kids down. It's student-led. Students are the ones who are making the decision because we know the teacher may be gone that day. The teacher may be taken out that day. We understand that, so we want the students to lead that training, and it's worked really well for us. A lot of people said we were crazy for doing that, and we're not. It's actually run a lot better since we started doing that. Also, I referenced some school shootings there. Aztec, New Mexico, about a year and a half ago, a man entered a building. He was a former student, not a graduate, entered the building, and he began shooting two students. He shot and killed two students, but the school reacted by locking down, by creating barriers, barricading. And that's the key, is keeping that separation between the shooter and the good guys. And they did it right. Virginia Tech, we see that as the worst shooting, but it actually could have been a lot worse, because if you ever research it, the last classroom that he went to, he couldn't get to the victims. They threw desks and everything they could in front to make sure that he could not get within 18 inches, which is about the average of a school shooter. You can't miss. So they did not allow that. So it was a big success. I know I'm on a time thing. Walkthroughs for local law enforcement. We're seeing some amazing byproducts of that. Local law enforcement are coming in and they're finding out what our schools look like. They're making those one-on-one connections with kids. So if you guys could promote that, that would be wonderful. I believe that once again, secondary locking devices. There are tons of them out there, and I'm probably going to run out of time here. But I was deployed to Iraq in 2004, and that was right when the IEDs started hitting the markets. And so I saw units that were coming and going from our base, and they did not have up-armored Humvees. They made up-armored Humvees the best they could. They put sheets of metal up, anything that would protect them until the Army could catch up. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're putting sheets of metal up, doing whatever we can one-on-one by schools, rather than getting any guidance from the states. And I get it, local control. But we need that guidance, and that's what I ask you guys to please provide. In conclusion, I want to show you, this is what we started off with when we started trying to figure out how to lock schools down back in 2012. We had no idea. Lebanon is known for making boats. So we went to Tracker Marine and said, hey, how can we tie doors off? We thought it's kind of like tying a boat off maybe. We just started with base knowledge. We didn't know. And so we worked with them. They donated the stuff, and I keep this on my desk because when I brought this and a couple of hundred back, something was going on in the news. And I went into the conference room and found out. And right when we were taking the little picture to show everybody how they're working with us and hey, we're trying to protect your kids, right as we snapped that picture, a guy named Adam Lanza was killing 6-year-olds in Sandy Hook. And I keep that there to remind myself that it could happen any day, anytime, anywhere. I think that's it. What questions do you guys have of me? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I do have a quick question about your student-led training. Could you give us a little bit more detail about that,
Sure.
how that works?
We know that there are going to be days we always have subs in the building. Subs are not going to be the best training. We do our best. We give them sub training, but we know that's not going to happen. So what we do is we tell the teacher, we school the teacher up, we tell the teacher, train your kids on this day here, but we're going to have unannounced drills. We tell them that during that drill, you are nothing but a safety observer. Kids are getting ready to do something bad, that's when you step in. Before that, though, it's the kids' decision on, hey, we announced there's a shooter in the main hall, in the main office, and I'm up in Donnelly's section, and I know I've got a long ways to go, and we know that 98% of the time, that's either going to be one shooter or two shooters together. So I know that I have a good chance of escaping, once again running, to escape that shooter. And maybe my doors are not, it's an old school part of the school, maybe it's not really good to lock down. But if I run and get my people away from the shooter, it's great. The students make that decision. And we thought it was going to be chaos when it started, but it was everything but, because the kids took ownership. And we tell them, hey, 60% of the time these shootings take place at businesses, not schools. We know that it's not just going to be a school threat. What you leave here with is not just a diploma on how to do math and English, but also how to take care of yourself in a situation like this.
Two quick questions, Mr. Reeves. First off, were you an infantryman in Iraq?
No, I was a Black Hawk door gunner.
Okay. Second thing is, I'm just wondering, what you're bringing to it sounds like an infantry mentality to me. So, that's
Maybe
why-
good, maybe bad, I'm not for
that's a
sure.
good thing. That's one infantryman to another.
I get that, yes, sir.
And then your interaction with law enforcement, did you all seek that out, or was that proactive, or did the Lebanon Police Force come to you and say, hey, look, we'd like to do
A
this?
little bit of everything. You know, we know that there's an initiative from the Missouri State Troopers to get troopers in the schools. But we also, before that was going, we already had Lebanon PD in, we had Sheriff's Department in. We conducted an active shooter training drill in July, and we had everybody and anybody that was possible, not just Sheriff, PD, Trooper, but also conservation agents, OEM, anybody and everybody who would come when the call went out. And we had them out, and it was a great training environment. It also lets them know what our school looks like. You know, at Columbine, one of the problems at Columbine is they thought that the cafeteria was over here on this side because 3 years before they had moved it. So when they breached and entered, they were on the wrong side of the school. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So it's a wonderful program, and we're getting lots of our law enforcement in there to see what it looks like.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, how often do you have these active shooter training?
We have a minimum, as far as student-led, a minimum of 4 a year. That's for you, and that's and it's, and there was a lady who said something, at first it did scare a few kids. But with anything else, kids adapt a lot better than we think they will. The reality is, an active assailant is scary, and we have to get them in the frame of mind that they can survive it. We tell them, hey, I've never been in a school shooting, but in my mind, I've been in a school shooting 1,000 times, and I've won it every single time. Put your mind in that situation so your body can react.
What age group do you do this with?
High school. We do. I'm with the high school 9 through 12. But the active shooters go all the way down, drills start with 2nd grade. And, we're talking about 2nd and 3rd graders. We think that they would just be everywhere, but the reality was they're exiting the building, they're getting to the local library, which is across the field, they're getting the victim away from the shooter. Yes, sir.
Do you have an SRO?
Yes, sir, we have 2. We have 2 in our district. We have about 4,300 students in our district, quite a few buildings.
Are they at your school all the time? Or
No.
do they go from one to another?
They go from one to the other.
When you do your active shooter drills, are they involved?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So they know and they're giving their input as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They're my right-hand man. And whatever they know, I know, and they speak for me and I speak for them. We are on line together.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you very much, sir. Anything else I can help with?
Just a comment. Again, it's obvious Craig's passion for school safety, and he's one of the examples that we've used in the state as a model for leadership. In fact, the Center for Education Safety now every year gives out a Heroes Among Us award to recognize somebody that's truly a hero in unusual ways, and Craig received that award several years ago, so I think it was well placed. Thank you.
Sir. I appreciate that. Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Deeds. I currently serve as a captain with the Christian County Sheriff's Office, and I'm the director of our school resource officers for the Ozark R6 School District. I'm a 33-year veteran in law enforcement, spent 25 years with the Springfield Police Department, the last 8. I've been serving as an SRO first and then currently serve as the director. Just to let you know a little bit about our school district, we currently have about 6,300 student population on our campuses. We have about another 1,300 staff population on our campuses. I believe that our district is very proactive in terms of keeping our students and staff members safe. However, we can always do more. We also, much like Lebanon, conduct intruder drills, active shooter drills, minimum of 4 times a year. Our K through 5, we have intruder drills at least 1 time a year in all of our buildings. We have drills in which students and staff alike leave the building, given the scenario that staff has given the teachers. They make their own informed decisions, and they base that upon the training that we instituted almost 2 years ago of Run, Hide, Fight. We have trained our students and staff members alike on what to do given on the location of the threat. If the threat's in the commons, if the people in the downstairs area of the building, they can escape and have an ability to run and exit, they do so. If they can't, they lock down. So we do a lot of proactive things in teaching our staff and students alike. We also have a trauma-informed committee that we're working with and through on mental health issues. We also have a team that we put in place last year identifying risk behaviors of students. But beyond that, there are a lot of things that we as law enforcement, we as educators cannot control. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to speak to the task force today. One of our biggest issues that we see not only in Ozark School District, Southwest Missouri, and I speak to a lot of my colleagues throughout the state, one of the biggest issues that we see is mental health. Again, I've been a police officer for 33 years, and I've never seen the amount of mental health issues that we're seeing today, and it's quite concerning. In my district, self-harm threats have risen from 25 in 2016-2017 school year. I checked today, we now are at 105 incidents for this year alone. I apologize. My math skills are horrible, and I hate to admit that in a school building. But that's over a 300% increase in 2 years. One of our big concerns that we see is our what we call repeat kids back in the office or to the nurse's office, kids who have continuing mental health issues. Our guidance counselors, nurses, and SROs are now tasked with being mental health assessors. We're not mental health professionals. We do not play that on TV, but we do wear many hats in that ring and trying to assess these kids and get them the best help possible. But we are lacking in that, and that was just one of the things that I wanted to address with the task force today. Once those kids go out the door with mom and dad, we suggest they get help. They often come back the very next day. These are cutters, kids who have a plan to commit suicide, and they're right back in our school buildings. We don't know if they're fit for school. And it's concerning to us. And we don't have any safeguards in place or any mandates in place to ensure that parents are getting these kids help. They're not bringing in doctors' waivers or anything indicating they've gotten help. We often turn to our hotline system to hotline these families because we feel that oftentimes they're not getting the help that they need. And what we see also is many times the parents themselves probably have a mental health issue as well. Not being judgmental, it's reality. So it's quite concerning what we're seeing in terms of mental health, and I would just ask that the task force look at that. I hear some of my cohorts out here echoing the same thing, that mental health is an issue across the state. The other issue that we have that our numbers have skyrocketed in is tobacco use in terms of vaping. The 2017-18, we recorded 72 tobacco violations in our district. This year, we're at 112 cases as of today. My concern is long-term health effects on these young kids. Last thing, and I'll close with this, effective communication and information sharing. Here in the Ozark, Southwest Missouri area, we have about 10 or 12 school districts that share information. We get together, talk about trends and training, different things we're seeing with students. What I would ask that the task force look at is some sort of database, something similar to the MIAC system that we could utilize. We could put information into. If Captain Woodson up in his jurisdiction needed information in Southwest Missouri, he could go into that database and see what's happening in Southwest Missouri or make contact with one of the officers in this area. I will close with that. If anyone has any questions, I'm free to answer that. I left a copy of this presentation with Mrs. Roderick.
Yeah, just a matter of, for our information, for instance, this last year we added a CES staff person at the MIAC. There's both a full-time CES staff person there as well as a dedicated MIAC, and again, maybe you'll address it after a while, analysts there supporting school safety. And again, I don't know if that product's getting out to in the trenches. I know we put together a newsletter now every week based on what they're developing there at the Intelligence Fusion Center. We're putting that out to schools as far as what's going on around the state, as well as some emerging best practices and stuff like that. But I don't know, we maybe need to do a better job marketing that. You maybe don't see that, do you?
I've not seen that product yet, but I would be happy to subscribe to that by all means.
Just to clarify what the MIAC is, it's the Missouri Information and Analysis Center, and it is a part of the Department of Public Safety, staffed by the Highway Patrol and CES, Center for Education Safety, as well as many other state entities that provide staffing for that center, and its purpose is to disseminate information to law enforcement as well as schools. Recently, the school violence hotline has been transferred from the Department of Social Services to the MIAC and will be staffed 24/7. So that is a tip line, and I know that there was a presenter earlier that recommended a tip line, and so that is one that will be advertised in greater detail as it's up and operational.
We do get lots of referrals from that tip line, and we have our own anonymous tip line within our district as well.
Very good. So any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Captain. One question you alluded to that oftentimes you resort to hotline for problematic perhaps students that you're seeing and maybe what's going on at home. How responsive do you find Department of Social Services in getting that and judging by your face that maybe it's not particularly responsive? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how responsive do you find
I'll
them?
be very candid and open with you. I'm glad you brought that up. It depends on who's answering the phone on the other end. Is typically will whether or not they're going to take that call. I'm trying to be politically correct here. Our staff
Please
members
don't feel the need to do that on my account. I would prefer to hear it to you straight.
Our staff members become very frustrated, not only with self-harm situations, but abuse and neglect situations. They become very frustrated because they'll spend 45 minutes to an hour on the phone for that call taker to say it does not rise to us taking, it does not meet the guidelines or requirements. So some call takers will take self-harms, others will not. We see kids who come back in with repeated cuts. Obviously, they're not getting the treatment they need, in our opinion. That's neglect. So that's why we make those calls. But it's not always the best for us when we call the hotline to report, and I understand. But we do try to utilize that tool as well to get services for the kids and their family.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
We appreciate what you do. One of the challenges that we've heard in other settings is the restrictions that are placed on you primarily by federal law in sharing of information, HIPAA, FERPA, things like that. Is that a challenge for you and how, what you see at the local level?
Well, for us, when we communicate with issues and problems involving children specifically related to mental health, I assume that's what your question is geared toward. It's usually with the parents. We explain to them, they need to get help for their children, get them treated. If they do not seek medical attention or go see a doctor, mental health expert, then we'll have to take custody of their children. If they do not, if their child is threatening suicide or self-harm. So we don't have really a lot of communication outside of parents and schools themselves. We do have a process in our county that we communicate and send reports. We document each self-harm case and send to our Christian County Juvenile Office to see if they can work with social services to ensure that there are services in the home. So if one safeguard is failing us or failing the student, we try to close that loophole and see and ensure that they're getting help and services through another means. But that's a challenge.
Thank you, Captain Deeds.
Thank you all for your time.
David Hall?
Hi there. My name is David Hall, and I live here in Springfield. I'm the director for University Safety for Missouri State University. Although I'm here speaking on behalf of myself, I've been involved in Homeland Security functions here within the state as well as nationally. So I just have a few things really to relate to the task force. First of all is thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate that. I am thrilled to see the governor has put this together and is focusing on safety of our schools. I think that's a very, very important one. I would encourage you as a task force to look at the after-action reports, specifically of Virginia Tech, which was previously mentioned. Sandy Hook, Columbine each have something to learn. But the one that came out in December, which was on the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, it is worth the read. It's probably about 10 hours to read it, but there are tremendous lessons learned from that of things that went very well and things that did not go so well. So I would encourage you to read that. It was a very candid look. And then as a result of that, you saw some very significant changes within the state of Florida and the things that they're doing. You saw the same thing within Virginia and certainly the changes within Virginia Tech. So one of my points is look at other states who have unfortunately suffered these type of incidents and the changes they made afterwards. I don't want us to be reactive. I want us to be proactive, and that's why I was thrilled to see what you're doing, and I'm encouraged certainly by that. Some of the things I would say is there's lots of information out there. So again, other states. There's also, if you're not familiar with NFPA 3000, it is the national standard on active shooter and hostile events. It was released last year as a multidiscipline document that gives consensus between law enforcement at the fire, EMS, community leaders, hospitals, educational systems, all the way from the local level, state level, and national level. We're all as part of that. So there is a national standard out there which covers virtually everything that you talk about related to this. So it talks about the number of drills that you should have and the type of systems you should have, because active shooters are really a community, a whole community impact. It's not just a school issue. It's not just a law enforcement issue. It requires everyone as part of it. The only thing that document does not cover is it does not cover the prevention side of that. And there was specific intent as to why that was omitted from that, and that probably will be addressed in future ones. I'm familiar with it because I served as the International Association of Fire Chiefs representative on that group. So, again, it's a multi-level, multi-discipline that I hope you take into account and not keep your focus of strictly as what does a school system need to do or what is it that law enforcement needs to do. As previously mentioned on this, behavioral intervention is absolutely key. Whenever you look at prevention, the things we often think of in active shooter situations is the things we do in after the fact, after it's already happened. If we want to save lives, you have to deal with behavioral intervention. There's good information out there. The FBI, obviously, Secret Service, all have really good information out there that helps with that. And it gets down to emergency preparedness. It comes to is developing good plans, training people on plans, and then exercising those plans. And the one thing that's not been specifically noted is notification systems. We certainly see that that's a challenge that we have, is how do we accurately communicate these type of incidents and differentiate them from other types of emergencies. Unfortunately, that's not a simple solution. I certainly deal with that on a college level with multi-buildings, multi-campuses, and that's very challenging, but certainly something that needs to be addressed as part of this. I would encourage the state to not only provide the guidance, but also provide resources. It simply cannot be that it gets dictated down to the local school district to say, here's what you need to implement, and this is really important, and then the state does not provide support in order to actually enact that. So it's got to be a partnership as part of, again, the local as well as the state. There are many things you can do within design, within retroactively creating systems so that can help. I use the analogy again, my background's fire service, and in the 1950s, we were in the same boat with fires as what we are today with active shooter. At that time we would have large fires with multi-fatalities, and we ended up addressing that through many of the systems that we do today. So we started enacting things like we do fire drills. Nobody thinks anything about it. It's just routine. We enacted things like having adequate exiting, having egress lights, all of that type of stuff, the building alarm systems. All of that was done in order to reduce deaths from fires. Today, we have lots of fires. Last year, we had over 5,000 fires in school systems, and yet nobody noticed. No deaths occurred from that. And the reason is because of all the years that we've done that. We're in the same place here. We need to work towards that. One place of caution, and I would disagree with one of our previous speakers on one point, is there are code compliant devices for securing people in lockable spaces. Don't be lured into is something that's a very quick fix. It's easy to say is we're going to create a device that we can lock a door, which then negates other safety features and we go backwards in other areas. There are devices out there that are approved. Look at your standards. They give you guidance on that, and certainly standards will evolve over time and codes will evolve over time. Don't set us up to go backwards in other areas of safety. So with that is I appreciate what it is you're doing. It's hard to be in a place where you are and come out with recommendations that everybody's going to appreciate or everybody's going to like. But whatever we do is we don't want to find ourselves on the back end of one of these type incidents and then making the hard decisions at that point. So thank you.
Questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Frank Gonzalez, the father of an SPS sophomore as well as a graduating senior that both have been in SPS since kindergarten. I've served on PTSA as well as I brought watchdogs to one of the schools, and I chaired an anti-bully program at another school, as well as I've spent 6 years on the SPS Parent Advisory Board. I'm also mental health first aid certified. So that's kind of a little bit of background. For me, I'm not law enforcement or any of those things. And I want to thank at least SPS, because I can only speak towards the Springfield Public Schools. I'd like to thank the people that have kept our children safe and have proactively taken a part in addressing potential threats, whether credible or unfounded. The fact that I feel that is the most important thing we can do is that prevention. And to this point, I feel that they've been very effective. So whatever we have in place that we're doing right now, I would like to see that continue. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment and a champion for firearm rights. I support the 20 Missouri school districts that have qualified campus protection officers. And I feel that currently, as presented, there's a House bill that they're quoting as guns everywhere. And like I said, I love my guns more than anybody else. And I feel that we need to have gun rights, but I do not support that bill as presented. I oppose, from what I've read and what I understand, I oppose that new bill that would essentially force schools to be the same across the board. And I feel that districts have the choice to choose. If one district says we're rural and we don't have, our response time is longer, they have the right to be able to have those, teachers, faculty, staff, and things like that are armed. And they have parameters in place as far as training and things like that. I feel that it needs to stay that way at the local level, and I don't know that the state needs to make a sweeping law that requires everybody to fit the same standard, depending on each school district, each individual needs. So, and then I want to talk a little bit about the mental health issue, and as it's been discussed, we're seeing this new culture of how children have a difficult time dealing and coping with these stresses of teenage life. And we have a friend of ours that my kids went to kindergarten with, a Kickapoo student that chose to take his own life. So it's really hit home for us, and myself as well as my children have done what we can to get mental health certified, first aid certified. And going back to reporting and things like that, I think that's the very first step and the most important part is taking these things serious, and we have to do something different. Whatever we're doing right now is not working because it's getting worse. I think we can all agree it's getting worse, and I would like to see us put more effort into teaching children resistance and resilience, and getting a better understanding of the stresses that they are going to go through, and teaching them how to cope with those difficult teenage years that we all went through. So that's about all I have. And again, I just wanted to thank the people that are doing a good job with what they have, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can. Yes.
Could you explain a little bit more in depth as to what first aid, mental health first aid certified is?
Okay, so here locally, we have a program that you can go through that if you are in contact with teachers or if you're a teacher, counselor, anything like that, and you have direct contact with students, you can get mental health first aid trained and certified if you complete it. And it's a one-day course, and they go through basically different signs of suicide, the initial interview that you could have with somebody, and then providing them resources, and if they meet the criteria, getting them help immediately. So in a nutshell, it's to try to help identify those students that can use the help as far as mental health goes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
That's
Mr.
fine.
Gonzalez, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
you.
Thank you.
Afternoon. I'm Officer Mark Gladfelter. I work for the Clinton Police Department, and I've been a law enforcement officer for 23 years. I've been an SRO for the last 17 in the Clinton School District, and I work with every building from the elementary all the way to the high school and tech school that does adult students. I hadn't prepared to speak tonight or anything. I just came down to see what was kind of going on and everything, and there's just a couple of comments I wanted to add with what we've heard tonight, and then add something that hasn't come up with that. I do a lot of different training. I'm a use of force instructor at a police academy. I teach DT, I teach firearms, I do a lot of active shooter training. I have taught active shooter at schools that have programs in place where they have armed the teachers. My district that I currently work for does not arm teachers. I think it is a great thing on both sides of that. In the use of force world, we go back to a Supreme Court decision, Graham versus Connor, that says it's the totality of the circumstances. And the district where I taught that arms their teacher, it's a very, very good thing for them. At my local district, it's really not needed as far as those things. If they wanted to, I'd be fine with it. But to try to say you should or should not is really ruling out one side or the other on those, because it depends on their individual circumstances. Through teaching for the last 17 years, active shooter and different things like that, we mentioned some of the door barricading devices, things like that. Those are all great. They should be implied or put into place in certain areas. But I also caution one of our local private schools used one of the devices. They trained all the students on that, and then I had to go ahead and let them know that the fact that all the students and the parents know that these are in there, well, if I'm a bad guy and it's happened before and I go in and I want to go ahead and take that whole room hostage, I can use the device they applied there too. So they are very good in some circumstances and very bad in others. And I think the more you might try to get involved and say, you must do this, you must do that. Often the government, those are when we bang heads and don't have good outcomes from that. I like having the authority at the local level to make those decisions. And the one thing that hasn't been, I guess, tied together tonight, we've heard a lot about active shooter, and that's an issue, but we have a law in place. They have to do drills. It has to be led by law enforcement. Now, my district, we're very well prepared on those things. For the gentleman who came up from a school, applaud you. That's simply training. They don't know the difference between a lockout and a lockdown, and that maybe needs to be done more of. But I would say at the local level, they need to go ahead and put pressure on the school board to get good quality training as far as those things in there. We've heard a lot about mental health. These things are all tied together. 17 years ago when I started in the schools, one of the teachers had sent an email out, and a study then showed that within 5 years, half of new teachers quit and move on. Their biggest complaint is they spend all their time disciplining students, not teaching. Through different things like No Child Left Behind, currently the IEP process and those things that are set in schools, I'm not sure if you guys are really familiar with those things, but basically if little Johnny has an IEP and he assaults another student, he gets treated differently than one who does not. Well, districts have problem students that are chronic discipline problems that are stuck there. They basically are in the classrooms. They get treated differently, and some of them have mental health issues. Some of them just do it because they can get away with it. The thing is if there's funding to be looked at, alternative schools are a great thing to get these students who do not
work well in a regular school environment out of that. As one teacher put it several years ago, that they talked about no child left behind. They said that's right, because no child's moving forward because they're spending all their time disciplining rather than teaching. So if you can look at this area and try to make the environment better so the teachers can actually teach, the mental health, all these things are kind of tied in. That's my statement on the cuff.
Questions? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Quick question. Since you have two different situations, two different school districts you're working with, and one obviously has a policy of allowing, is it all teachers to be armed or just the SPO or?
No, that was just a school that I went and did active shooter training at, Alice training, and it was a rural school. Their law enforcement response time is about 45 minutes compared to in Clinton, when we've actually had people call in. It was actually an ROTC student carrying one of their drill rifles, but we were there within 2 minutes. Apples and oranges as far as those things, but to say one school district should not be allowed to, and it's just bad policy as far as those things go. As far as the training requirements and those things that I've seen on there, I'm a firearms instructor, and there's a few people I can pick in the different school districts that I feel more comfortable with than other law enforcement officers showing up, because I've seen them shoot on the range. So it's all, schools have retired military, there are retired police officers, there are a lot of people in there that are qualified on that particular end, and the idea that they're just going to give everyone a gun would be a horrible idea, because most of them wouldn't want to, but there's certain ones that could do that, and there's different programs out there for that, and that can be a very good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Laffelder.
Michael McCoy.
Good evening, folks. I'm Michael McCoy, Chief of Police with the Everton Police Department. I've heard this mentioned a few times tonight and throughout various conferences and things like that. There seems to be a big problem with avoidance in the education system. Teachers do not want to admit that there's a problem. They want to look the other way. But that threat exists, and we all know it exists because we see it on TV so frequently. So I'm not saying that it's going to happen every day. I'm not going to say it's going to happen every year or in every school, but it does happen. So what are the solutions that we have? Right now, mostly we look towards SROs. Some news agencies, the public, have advocated for armed guards, and some have advocated for arming teachers. Now, unfortunately, in my small community, we have very few police officers in my city. We don't have 24/7 coverage. Our coverage comes from the sheriff's office, who often only has 1 to 2 deputies on at a time. Now, I've worked for that sheriff's office, and I can tell you response time can be up to over an hour. And we know that these incidents often take just minutes. So, I know that funding is available for SROs, but often when it comes to smaller communities, the people that administer those funds will often tell you that small communities are not where the money needs to go. If you're comparing a school with 30,000 students versus a school with 5,000 versus a school with 200 students, who is going to get more protection out of those grant dollars? It's not going to be the school with the 200 students. That's been my experience so far. So, unfortunately, if we don't have the money to pay for these smaller schools, I hate to say it, I know that not everyone likes the idea, but arming teachers may be our best bet. Now, I think that there needs to be some standards. I think that, as some have said, they need to go through firearms training. They need to go through active shooter training. There needs to be additional solutions beyond just firearms. But I also think, most importantly, that those teachers that do get the acceptance to carry that firearm, it should be 100% voluntary. I don't think that any teacher should ever carry a firearm into a school that is not comfortable with it. And I think all law enforcement are confronted with that fact from the day of their first initial interview with any agency. Often you will sit down and someone at a board will say, if you come into a lethal force situation, are you comfortable using deadly force? And you have to decide yes or no. And often, if you're not sure, they will look at you and say, well, maybe you should go home and reevaluate your career choice. So, same thing for these teachers. They need to reevaluate whether they feel comfortable carrying a gun, using force, and they are subject to the same rules and liabilities as any other citizen with a concealed weapons permit. So, as I said, is it getting better or worse? I would say we're actually getting better. I think that school shootings are on the decline in this country, thankfully, but they are still out there, and it only takes one angry citizen, one angry teacher, one angry parent, or one angry student to come in and ruin everyone's day. So it might be time to make a decision on what to do. I know that it's a brutal thing that we don't want to talk about, and I know the fate of our students could hang in the balance. That's all I've got to say. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
No. Thank you, Chief. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Apologize, I didn't prepare any remarks. Some things came up, though, that I thought I would jump in the fray here a little bit. My name is Ryan Burkhardt. I'm a captain with the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and I'm also the director of the Missouri Information Analysis Center. My job is, in essence, to identify the threats to the state of Missouri and take action to mitigate those threats. And a much more narrow scope in this context, identify the threats to our schools and take action to mitigate those threats. We have, over the past several months, undergone several action steps to transfer the school violence hotline from the Department of Social Services over to the MIAC. We are anticipating a full transfer within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we will be going from a Monday through Friday, essentially 6 to 5, I believe, schedule to a 24/7 schedule where we'll be taking in the threats, disseminating as appropriate, analyzing as appropriate, and trying to provide a more thorough response to the threats that come in. At some point, I would recommend we all get together in a different forum with a little bit more time available. There's quite a bit we could discuss, of course. Right now, my greatest concern with taking on the school violence hotline is not necessarily what we can do with it. We can do a lot of good with it, but our capacity is my concern. With our staffing, who knows what kind of numbers are going to come in on these calls. Looking at other states, it's been in the thousands, and we can certainly handle much of what comes in through software, through the staffing that we have. But the reality of it is we probably do need a longer-term strategy depending on what these numbers flesh out to be in the longer term. With that being said, again, I just wanted to introduce myself to all of you and, as I said, offer an opportunity at some point for us all to come together and hopefully come up with a broader strategy for the school violence hotline.
Thank you, Captain Burkhardt. Any questions of Ryan?
Just a suggestion, possibly after you get the hotline up, maybe offer the task force to come out and tour the MIAC possibly, to see just the hotline, how, explain the mechanism, how it works, and see the rest of the operation.
I would welcome that.
And I'm sure the answer to this is yes, but just to confirm, have you talked with, whether it be Colorado, Florida, maybe some of your counterparts in those other states? Maybe they may have a completely different arrangement, but if the state police force is involved in their school safety, have you been able to maybe take some lessons from them or potentially avoid some pitfalls from them, or maybe it's still too early to do that? I don't know.
No, we're going to be modeling much of what we do off of Colorado. In fact, we'll be bringing a consultant in who designed Colorado's program, so it will be significantly the same, as best we can anyway. We're not quite there yet, but that is our goal. We want to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, Captain Burkhardt. I know that this is not an easy task to redo this system, but to go from a limited hour operation to a 24/7, I think is critical, and to make a more robust system for the state of Missouri. So, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We have no other members.
Anyone else? If you didn't sign up, you're not prohibited, so please come forward, state your name, and provide your comments.
Wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do it now.
That's okay. Yeah.
My name is Shay Lane, and a lot of my former direct reports are behind me here, and the sheriff that protects my family is behind me, so I'll keep this brief. I work for a group that has a service area for 39 counties in southern Missouri. We go from Joplin to Cape Girardeau. We have over 22 school districts that we're privatized. We're a faith-based group. I want to keep that at your forethought as you go forward. Paul and I discussed this earlier, is to remember the faith-based schools and the private schools as you make this determination, because they are sorely underfunded. They are completely soft targets, and they have huge hearts. The faith-based groups want to bring everybody in and make sure that they're taken care of. At the same time, they take a lot of shots. We've had arsons this year. We've had burglaries with people in the facilities this year. We've had active shooters, not credible active shooters, and we've got targeted violence. We have people that do surveillance on our staff. They steal from them, so they're constantly targets. We've had computers stolen from these staff with critical information on it. So again, I want to share to do that. I want to swing it from preparedness, protection, and response and mitigation. What we haven't talked about is recovery. And that's something that we do. We are the leader in disaster case management across southern Missouri. We cover all those 39 counties, hundreds of jurisdictions that we fall in there. I've been an opportunity to work with Sandy and with Paul in the past, with Missouri One, and when before that with ERIP. That never got a foothold. I wish it had, because it is that collaborative tool that's free, that's got free training, that very few people put their game plan on there. You could put your floor plan on there. You could see your hard corners. You had basically the blueprint for the response entities. I highly encourage this task force to be a part of that recovery conversation with SEMA. They're building an emergency recovery framework, and I think you should have your own emergency support function within that framework just for school recovery. So if you haven't thought about that, please do, because that is in the draft phase. It's in the final phases of development. It's not been fully implemented and pushed out from SEMA, but I think it is due to be pushed out in the near future. But if you're not a part of that recovery process, then you're missing one of those vital stages of emergency response and recovery. So that's all I wanted to say. If you have any questions for me. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate
Would you
it.
please fill out a witness form? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Sheriff Cole.
Good afternoon. I sat back and was quiet as long as I could be quiet. Captain Deeds tried to be as politically correct as he could, and I'm going to sit here and be not politically correct at all. But obviously the focus of this task force is the safety of our children. And one of the things that bothers me the most, and Adam, I'll just tell it to you straight, the biggest gross waste of state money, in my opinion, is Department of Social Services. And I speak about this from a first-hand experience of losing my grandchild for several factors, but one being social services not doing their job as far as inspections of daycares. So we can go way down the list, but if my numbers are correct, and I'm remembering correctly, I think 7% of all of our hotline calls from my county last year were substantiated by social services. 7%. I can stand on my head in the corner all day long and substantiate 7% of all reports of hotlines of children in my county. So until we get a hold of social services and get them whatever it is they need, the training they need to do the job that we ask them to do, to get them on board with us and whoever else is on this panel working together, until we get them on board and can get some services in these homes, what we do at our job all day long, or counselors at schools do all day long, basically does no good. We're helping them during the daytime when we have them for a few hours, but they're not getting help at home. And I understand there's more fingers to point at other places besides that, but in my opinion, that is one of the biggest problems that this state faces, is being able to get these kids help at home that they need and the follow-up that they need at home. We can work with them all day long, but when they go home, they're home. We have to do something to revamp the system to make them more effective to affect the children while they're at home.
Thank you, Sheriff. Can I want to ask you a question about that. On the 7%, is that motivation or training? Your opinion?
I think you could probably put both eggs in one basket. I think a lot of it is lack of training. You put these young people that come right out of college with a degree that don't have any investigative training. You're asking them to do investigations, law enforcement type investigations, without the tools to do it. That's a problem.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, training is something that is more easily fixable than motivation, and so I'm interested. That's why I was interested in your insights in that. Neither one of those are good, but it would seem to me that training is a solvable problem more so than motivation. That would be much more concerning to me. But I mean, at 7% of all the calls, it's fair to say that there is probably a combination of both.
Yes, I agree. And in my opinion, a philosophy from the top that trickles down as well.
Motivation.
Yeah.
Sheriff, would you fill out a witness form? So if we want to recontact you and have a further conversation, we can? Good, thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
My name is Jeff Weed. I've been in education for about 25 years. I'm an administrator. Come from a family of educators. I have 5 girls who all attended school here. I've got 2 here currently, 1 on the way, 2 out, and we're hoping that'll end sooner rather than later. I just would like to make sure that, remind everybody here, things have changed for teachers. I taught and I'm an administrator. When most of our teachers started that are currently in the system now, it was not their job to put their life on line for kids. It might happen maybe somewhere off in the far distance, but that's changed for them. So all I'm asking you to do is, number one, consider the change that teachers are going through. Not that it's bad, but it's different. And it's something that we need to, and we work at adjusting, teaching these people to do. It's not easy to tell a young 22-year-old student who comes in all of a sudden, hey, if things go wrong, it's you or them. That's a big change for a lot of them. So I'd like you to consider that when you're moving forward with this. The second thing is, these people that I work with are second to none. The teachers, the kids, the staff, the emergency response people we work with, I have not run into one issue with anybody not wanting to do more. We are doing our best to modify, adapt, and overcome on a daily basis, and I have seen nothing but improvement in balance with what is given us for guidance, etc. So flexibility. Please have flexibility in what you do. I'm an old ground pounder. I have a lot of training in different areas on security, individual security, team security, and we can go down the list. But modify, adapt, and overcome are the three things that are the most important in emergency situations. You've got to roll with it, because every plan, once it hits the fan, we all know what happens. So that flexibility is extremely important. And personally, I do not support teachers, all teachers having, being able to carry. I think it does need to be on an individual basis, and that training needs to be maintained. I would say that there would be very few, if any, of the gentlemen behind me and women that carry on a daily basis that would argue with me in that aspect. But I cannot speak for them, I can only speak for myself. I just want to throw that out there.
Any questions of Mr. Wheat?
It is a real name.
I'm sorry?
It is a real name. Thank you. Entertaining. Thank you for your time.
Did you fill out a witness form?
I sure did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you guys for putting this together. My name is Dylan Peterson. I'm a school resource officer with the Billings School District. I've been assigned to the school for almost a full school year. I came from patrol, was in patrol for about 4 years. I do have one concern with teachers carrying in lieu of officers carrying on campus. And that would be most SROs come from a patrol background where they're more familiar with the use of force, the use of force than a teacher would be. Someone had mentioned earlier that the school shootings are in decline. I would disagree with that too, just because I think the Department of Homeland Defense recorded approximately 90 school shootings in 2018. It's still a problem, and I don't know if it may not be a problem in Missouri right now, but it definitely could be. And I think we need to be prepared for it in case it is. And I actually attended the school resource officer training. I believe you were one of the instructors. And it was a very good course, and that opened my eyes to a lot of the possibilities that could happen. And again, that is training that teachers do not get. I just wanted to add that. And I'm not totally against. I understand that there's some school districts or some departments that maybe not be able to provide an officer for a school, but maybe this state can provide funding for that school or for that agency to be able to provide that service to the students, because it is a very valuable. Not only does it provide safety to the school, but it provides a relationship with the students, a law enforcement to student relationship. It breaks that barrier with a lot of kindergartners, they love cops. If they have an officer in their school, they love it. They love the stickers you hand out to them. They draw you pictures all the time. I got a drawer full of all the pictures they've drawn me since I've been there, just 9 months. It's an incredible relationship that I just hate for every school not to have. But do you guys have any questions?
Adam?
Thank you, Officer Peterson. Tell me the district again?
Billings.
Billings, okay. Most common, and I want you just to say this off the top of your head, what is the most likely threat? Not the one that keeps you awake at night, but the one that you see probably as you go to work every day. What would you consider the most likely threat that you run into on a daily basis?
Well, I kind of trained to expect the unexpected. I mean, you got to be ready for anything. It's not just one certain threat that I expect every day. It's the totality of the circumstances, I guess would be the word for that.
Then what's the one you see the most then? What's the interaction that you have the most in your capacity on a daily basis with students? What is the interaction that the not friendly interaction? Is that most common from fights? Is that most common from, I don't know I'm just trying to get a feel for what it is on a daily basis that.
I see what you're saying. there's really no negative things at our school. And that's not to say we're definitely not the perfect school. We have our problems, but we've had, I think, one assault since I've been there. We just don't have them. And I don't know if that's because I'm there. I guess I don't know. But I don't know if that's because I'm there. I don't know what it was like before I was there, but in that assault was nothing compared to what I handled on patrol. So, I mean, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sir. Would you fill out a witness form for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Oh, I'm sorry. Melissa.
This may not be a fair question for you, and I may need to turn to you to get this answer to,
Okay.
but what is the right ratio for a number of students per SRO?
I believe the NASRO recommends 1 per 1,000, and then they also ask you to take into account the distance between school buildings and stuff of that nature. If that's correct,
That is a national, but as with SRO training, it's always good to have an SRO in a school building. The multiple buildings have shown that it's rougher because they're moving from one building to another building and things, but so I guess the best thing is just 1 per building, no matter if it's elementary, middle school, or high school.
Very good.
that's what I would think it should be, but just because if you have someone 2 miles down the road that covers that 1 to 1,000 ratio, there's still going to be 4 minutes, maybe more out, and that's 4 minutes someone's with your kids. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Officer Peters.
Good afternoon. My name is Darren Chance. I'm the Chief of Police in Ash Grove, but I'm also the Chairman of the Missouri School Resource Officers Association. And a lot of good topics today and a lot of things to look at, but I wanted just to introduce myself to you. We have one of our members on the task force, Captain Kevin Woodson. Couldn't be in better hands. We appreciate him. He's, long story short, been my mentor years ago and kind of brought me into this business, so you couldn't have a better person on the panel. But I would like, oh yeah, well, just a few dollars, but I'd like to offer my services and the services of our board if you need anything. We're more than willing to provide any kind of feedback, answer questions, resources, anything like that. If there's anything you need at all, just don't hesitate to ask, and I'll provide you with business cards at the conclusion of the meeting. If you have any questions of me, feel free. I'm at your disposal. Anything at all? Very nice to meet everybody. Thank you.
Seeing no one else, I certainly appreciate, I know as on behalf of the task force, your willingness to attend and to provide your honest feedback. We certainly will take that into account as we are continuing our work on the task force. So thank you, and this concludes our task force hearing.
The task force website, I think that Amy's got it taped to the front of the table here, or in the center. This video will be posted there, as well as the videos from all the other sessions around the state, as well as other useful information. So you might want to write that down if you want to learn anything about what the task force is doing.
In addition to the videos being available there, there's also a section on the Missouri School Boards Association website where you can provide your feedback. If you get away from here today and say, I wished I would have said that, please feel free to put it on there. So thank you.